Hi, everybody. This is Eugene Bradley. I am the founder and CEO of the Silicon Valley Transit Users. Today, we're going to feature video of the June 18th, 2021 VTA Board of Directors meeting. Now, for technical reasons, as VTA claimed, they were not able to live stream their meeting on YouTube like they normally do other board and committee meetings. So I'm going to put that on our YouTube just for this one. Amongst other things you'll hear at this meeting is that VTA will discuss their BART Phase II plans from downtown San Jose into Santa Clara. You'll also hear their proposed business plan, which will point out some of the flaws in that business plan. And finally, you're going to hear from VTA about the task force they have formed to help restore light rail service after the tragedy of May 26th. So go ahead, enjoy the video from the VTA Board of Directors meeting, and enjoy. Thank you and have a nice day.
It's 9 o'clock on my phone. We can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Well, hello and good morning to everyone. The VTA Board of Directors meeting for today, June 18th, 2021 is called to order. At this time, I want to ask board members to unmute their mics as we will be doing a roll call.
Abekoga?
Here.
Blankley? Burt?
Here.
Carrasco? Chavez?
Here.
Constantine?
Present.
Davis? Gilmore?
Here.
Jimenez? Lee? Lee Ing? I believe she's having some technical difficulties, so she'll join us shortly. Licardo? Licardo? I'll come back to you. Montano? Montano? Member Montano? I cannot hear you, but I see you. I'll mark you present. Paul?
Here.
Perales? Rennie?
Here.
Simidian? Jones?
Present.
Hendricks?
Attending.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, great, thank you. Before we go on to our agenda, I just want to say a few words. It has been 3 weeks and 2 days since the tragedy happened. We still mourn the loss of lives. I can only imagine how difficult and challenging it is for the family and friends of the victims. This tragedy is an unprecedented situation for us all as an organization. I want to take this opportunity to thank our employees who come to work day in and day out to continue to provide the much needed service to our community, even in these very challenging times. I also want to thank the staff who've been working very hard to support their fellow employees and to make sure that our organization continues to function. For those of you who took time off to deal with this incredible grief, I want you to know that we support you. We know that your well-being and health is of utmost importance. I'm very hopeful that we will get through this tragedy together. It will be hard and the road to healing is long, but with each other's support, we will get there. Moving on to 1.2 orders of the day. I want to note that we have an addendum to the agenda, item 9.1.A.X, conference with real property negotiators. 3 properties are being removed from agenda item 4.1, resolutions of necessity. Properties owned by Honco, that's B3110 Della Maggiore, B3109, and Downtown San Jose Towers, LLC, B4042. Staff has requested placing agenda item 7.2 in the authorization to enter into a project labor agreement to consent. Do my colleagues have any changes or suggestions for our agenda? I'm not seeing any hands. Staff, did you have any other changes?
No, Chair.
Before I ask for a motion, I want to remind everyone that we have a special meeting immediately following this meeting. And in the interest of time, I would like to encourage everyone to be concise when making their comments. Is there a motion to approve the orders of the day with the changes that I suggested?
So moved, Chair.
Second.
So it looks like that was moved by Constantine and seconded by Jones. If there are no other comments, could you please vote us?
Burt?
Yes.
Carrasco,
Yes.
Chavez. I'll come back to you. Constantine,
Aye.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Liccardo,
Yes.
Montano. Member Montano is having some difficulties with her audio, so if we could just get a nod from you. Hang on, I'm finding your tile. I don't see you either, so I'll come back to you in a little bit. Paul
Aye.
Perales, I'll come back to you. Simidian, Jones,
Aye.
Hendricks,
Yes.
I'll come back to Member Chavez. Okay, I'll note her as absent. Montano. Okay, since you're not here, I'll ask Gilmore.
Yes.
Thank you. Perales, Simidian. Motion passed, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much for that. I'm moving on to number 2, awards and combinations. There are no awards and combinations today. So I'm going to move on to item 3, which is public comment. This is public comment for items not on the agenda. A reminder for those who want to address the board under public comment, please use the raise hand function in the app, or if you're using your phone, press *9. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the board of directors on any item within the board's jurisdiction, and speakers are limited to 1 minute. The law does not permit the board action or extended discussion on any item that is not on the agenda except under special circumstances. Those with customer service concerns are encouraged to contact our customer service department after you make your comment. Their contact information is going to be displayed on the screen. We will now start public comment. Thalia, do we have any speakers?
I do not see any hands raised. Oh, I see one hand raised, but before we go to that, I'd like to note for the record that we received written public comment from Bill Huff, and that has been posted on the agenda portal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And we've got 2 hands raised. Blair, you may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. There's supposed to be some form of harmonic convergence in some form or another by the year 2023. Whether it is of the mind or of serious natural disaster preparedness, I'm not sure. I am choosing it as natural disaster preparedness at this time that could be a part of a series of community ideas simply based on good human rights and positive good reasonings of sustainability that can help us now and into the future of 2023 with ideas of equity, reimagine, health and human services ideas, open public policies, and overall better practices. It is looking for and wanting to practice our better ideals now that can help us more easily transition out of any future natural disasters in the SF Bay area in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. It is with this friendly thinking and good reasoning, I hope that we can address the future of the light rail in more positive terms of its green sustainability, and that has always been ready available to us and help for the entire county. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Roland. You may begin speaking when ready.
Good morning. Good morning, directors. Couple of quick items. First of all, Governor's Executive Order N2920 has been obsolete for 2 days now. The new Executive Order is N821, and which applies until September 30th. I'll be forwarding the details to Elaine. The only item for your attention is that all the public comments for item 7.4 have disappeared from the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That looks like that was our last public speaker, so I'm going to close the public speaker section. And Director Smitty, you have your hand up?
Thank you. Only to ask that I be recorded as arriving at 9:07. Sorry to be late, colleagues, and I did have a chance to hear both public comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move now on to our public hearings. We're at item 4.1 is the resolutions of necessity for 2 properties for construction of VTA's BART Silicon Valley Phase II project. Ron Golem, Director of Real Estate and Transit-Oriented Development, will present each item. Ron will provide a presentation for each property, and then I will open the hearing for the property. Property owners or their representatives will be given 5 minutes to speak. Members of the public who would like to address the board on the resolutions of necessity will be given 1 minute to speak after the staff presentation for all properties have been done. Ron, are you here?
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'd like to start by noting that the complete administrative record for this hearing is contained in the board memo and the staff report that is in the board packet. What I'll be presenting here are highlights from some of that material. I also thought that because this is the first resolution necessity for the BART Phase II extension, and we have a number of board members who have not been involved in this process before, I'd first start with a couple-minute overview of the BART Phase II real estate program and how this process works. If I could go back to the title slide, the prior slide, please. For the benefit of the board and members of the public, our expectation is that the BART Phase II extension will require acquisition of potentially 90 or more properties in order to build the extension. And the project schedule is such that most of that acquisition work has to begin prior to the end of next year. What we know from our work and the lessons we learned on the first phase of the BART extension, building the Milpitas and Berryessa North San Jose stations, is that nearly half of the properties may require a resolution necessity. That is because often it is the case that until we have a resolution necessity, we cannot get property owners to seriously engage with us in acquisition. For BART Phase II extension, that may mean that we need as many as 45 resolutions of necessity between now and the end of next year. We began writing offers and doing appraisals on property late 2020, and we've been working through the first round of acquisitions. Our focus has been on properties that are needed early in the construction process, as well as complex sites. And I'll note that some of the complex sites are sites where we have tenants or occupants that need to be relocated. And that is because VTA is obligated to provide relocation assistance to those occupants. And that work typically cannot begin until we actually have possession of the property. So now I'd like to give a very brief overview of the process that leads to us bringing a resolution necessity hearing to the board. It's important to understand that all of our property acquisition is governed by federal and state statutes related to acquisition of property with very active oversight by the Federal Transit Administration. By law, we must pay property owners just compensation, which is defined as fair market value as set by appraisal. All of the property owners who may be affected by the BART Phase II extension were first notified in 2017 during the planning for the extension and the environmental review process. Since that time, we have provided regular updates to those owners. For an individual property, when we begin the acquisition process, we first send them a notice of our decision to appraise a property and invite the owner to join us with our appraiser in inspection of the property. Once we present an offer based on the fair market value as set by the appraisal, we also provide the owner with up to $5,000 for that owner to hire an appraiser to inform their assessment of the property's value. We generally seek to allow at least 3 months between the day we present an offer and when we bring a property to the board for a resolution of necessity, unless we have a situation in which an owner will not engage with us, in which case we'll accelerate that. So for this acquisition process, our focus is on getting possession of the property so that we can maintain the project schedule. After we file with the court to get possession of the property, we continue to negotiate with the owners on setting the compensation. We go through extensive negotiations, if necessary mediation, and ultimately, if we cannot reach agreement, a trial to settle what is the compensation owed to the owner. It's important to note that when we do file with the court, we deposit our estimate of just compensation with the court, and those funds are available to the owner to withdraw for their use, even as we continue to negotiate what the final settlement amount will be. Finally, I'll say that from staff's perspective, we are committed to working on negotiations to reach fair settlements that treat all parties in an equitable manner. We have a very successful track record, and in phase one, we only end up having to have a handful of trials to settle what the just compensation is, and we believe that will be the case in this situation. With that overview, if I could have the next slide, please. So for this resolution necessity hearing, the slide shows the 4 tests that are established in law for adoption of the resolution necessity and for VTA to acquire property by eminent domain. And those requirements are, first, that the public interest and necessity require the project. The second item is that the project is planned or located to be most compatible with the greatest public good and the least private injury. The third item is that the property in the resolution is necessary for the project. And finally, an offer of just compensation has been made. I should note that the price for the property or the compensation to the owner is not a subject for this resolution of necessity hearing. Next slide, please. This map shows the location, and to build on the chair's comments, I'll first note that three properties that were originally in the package have been resolved for the moment. The first is one of the properties we signed a possession use agreement with the property owner. So what that means is we now have possession of the property, the PUA that we need for the project, and we'll continue to negotiate with the owner on compensation. As the chair noted, on two other properties, we received objection letters from the owners, which were forwarded to the board, and we have postponed consideration to allow us more time to engage with the owners on the matters they've presented. So for this hearing, we are now presenting two properties, and if I go to the next slide, I'll describe the first one. This is parcel B3139, located between 29 and 31 East Santa Clara Street. This is between 1st and 2nd Street, and you see it highlighted in the yellow box. This is a property that is one of two properties that we need to build a secondary head house for the downtown San Jose BART station. If I could have the next slide. The owner of the property is Z Hanna LLC, a California limited liability company. It currently is, there's a small commercial building on the site, and the total property area is slightly over 3,100 square feet. We require the entire fee interest in the property. We made an offer on the property on December 3rd, 2020, and we have not yet been able to reach agreement. If I could have the next slide. The second property is parcel B3219, located at 41 West Santa Clara. This is between Market and 1st Street in downtown San Jose, and this is the location of the primary head house for the downtown San Jose BART station. If I go to the next slide. This is a bit of a complicated acquisition because there's actually two distinct ownership interests. The land under this for this site is owned by an entity of Green Valley Corporation and Chase 41 West LLC. The actual building itself is actually owned by JP Morgan Chase Bank under a long-term ground lease. And the current use is a bank building, and as an aside, I'll note that this is also the location of VTA's downtown service center. The property area is approximately 16,500 square feet, and for the project, we require the entire fee interest. In other words, we require both the building interest and the land interest. We made an offer on January 15th, 2021. We have not been able to reach agreement, and Chase has notified us that it has retained eminent domain counsel and will not engage further with us until we file for possession of the property. If I go to the next slide. That concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. I'm going to now formally open the hearing. And is there anyone who would like to address the board for property ID B3139 owned by Z Hanna LLC? Is there anyone with a property? I guess this is just for the person, any persons who have want to represent the property owner in this. Oh yeah, I'm assuming we don't have anybody to do that.
That is correct.
Okay, Member Liccardo, I see you have your hand up. I was going to do questions after we do the other property owner, but is there something you wanted to do first? Member Liccardo, since I'm not hearing you, I'm assuming you're willing to wait till we get to board member comments. Okay, I'm not seeing.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to ask
Okay.
a question. Yeah, I'm sorry. Here, my apologies.
No problem.
Okay.
So just double checking one last time, Thalia, it looks like we have no property interest owner to speak on B3139. Ron, is there?
I do want to note, though, for the record, that we did receive written comment objection from Rossi Domingue for both properties that are part of the hearing today.
Okay, thank you. Ron, is there anything else you have to say before I go to see if we have anybody for the next property?
I do not, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned, the complete administrative record is in the board memo and staff report in the board packet.
Okay, I'm going to check now. Is there anyone who would like to address the board for property ID B3219 owned by Green Valley Corporation and Chase 41 West LLC and JP Morgan Chase Bank? Is there anybody who is a property owner speaker for this item?
Does not look like it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next, now I'm going to go and see if there are any questions from my colleagues. And Board Member Liccardo, you had your hand up.
Thank you. My apologies for my bad connection. I think I fixed it since. Just a question about who the real parties are in interest, because I don't know if ZHANA refers to a person or if there's specific individuals. I just need to make sure I check for purposes of our obligations under Government Code Section 84308. Ron, can you just tell us a little more about any of the individuals associated with these properties?
Mayor, I'll defer to the General Counsel regarding 84308 issues. With respect to ZHANA, it's an individual, and I do not have that name at the moment. With respect to the other property, of course, the building interest, JP Morgan Chase is a corporation.
Yes.
The other property that involves Green Valley Corporation, that is an entity that was created by Swenson Development Corporation, and they have various investor interests with them in that LLC.
Okay, in a bunch of caution, if we're not sure exactly who all, I appreciate Ron, certainly about JP Morgan and Green Valley. I'm going to recuse myself under Section 84308.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues? I'm going to go ahead and go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Director Montano. I did receive some of those, a few of those letters from the owners, and I was just curious: is that what is the protocol on reading those letters so the public will know, or is that not? Do we not do that? I'm not sure, because usually, you know, that's what we do on our console. But we get a letter, we read it out loud. But I guess I'm not sure what the standard procedure is for this.
The letters that were received are public record, and they are shared with the public and available for all in the board packet. We do not read the letters in the meeting, but they are available for members of the public and the board to review.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm going to check. I'm going to go ahead and open up to the members of the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board on these resolutions of necessity? You'll have 1 minute to speak. I see we have some hands raised, so Thalia, if you could let our speakers in.
Well, thank you, Chair. We have 2 speakers. First speaker is Blair. You may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I'm hoping I can speak to overall eminent domain issues on this item. As the BART Phase II project will be heading into downtown in the Diridon Station area, I just wanted to remind that there is some trouble with political will to get eminent domain issues solved for the future of the light rail to come into Diridon Station, and that that can be okay. I think we can I think we're at a space where we can possibly put things off in San Jose and not make any immediate decisions. And with that, really focus and concentrate on the future of the CHSR being built from LA to Fresno, to Merced, to Stockton, to Sacramento. If the local area, Bay Area, the state, and the nation learns to accept that practice, I think that would just create a great focus for all of us. And it's there that we can haggle about the different transit areas of the Bay Area, LA to Anaheim, and the Stockton area about the future of the high-speed rail. Good luck with this issue. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Roland. You may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments and a question through the chair. First of all, I really appreciated Mr. Gorlam's presentation, and I copied you all on the letter I just wrote to the Caltrain board. suggesting that they handle property acquisition in a similar manner. And quite frankly, moving forward, I think we will subcontract these transactions to VTA. I also think it's a long time overdue that we update the new board on exactly what it is that we're doing with this BART system, and basically let them chime in on next steps. And the question I have to the chair is whether one of the parcels that you removed earlier during orders of the day is the gas station at the corner of Santa Clara and 4th Street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just check. Ron, do you want to just comment on that question? Was one of those properties the gas station?
Sure. No, it is not. I think for the board's information, the property that's referenced was environmentally cleared for the BART Phase II extension. However, and this is true of other properties that were cleared as well, subsequent design work has enabled us to reduce the amount of properties that we believed would be required. And so at this point, we have not identified a need for that property for that project. And so it is not part of the subject of this hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm closing the public hearing section portion here. General Manager, you have your hand up.
Yes, and I'm speaking as General Counsel. Thank you, Chair. To Member Liccardo's question regarding the Zihana property, the principal there is Emmanuel Caleta. And I also have a question whether that information, with that information, you'll be recusing from both properties or just the one?
I should recuse myself as to the JP Morgan and Green Valley. I won't recuse as to the other. Thank you, Evelyn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Sam, do you still have your hand up to speak?
Sorry,
No problem. Okay, so I closed the public hearing. I want to come back to my colleagues and see if there are any other comments or questions from them. Not seeing any hands there. Can I get a motion and a second to close the hearing and adopt the resolutions of necessity for two properties as noted on the screen?
So moved.
By a second by Chavez.
Okay, so it looks like it was moved. And just for this, does the maker of the motion, can you just actually read the IDs of the property so that it's clear in the record?
Okay, so property number 1 would be B3139, and property number 2 would be B3219.
Okay, great, thank you. I just want to make sure I'm getting everything that the legal people want us to go ahead and do. Are there any last comments or questions from my colleagues? I'm not seeing any raised hands. So Elaine, could you please roll call vote us, please?
Burt,
Yes.
Carrasco,
Yes.
Chavez,
Yes.
thank you. Constantine,
Aye.
Jimenez,
Aye.
Liccardo, I just wanted to confirm you're voting for Zihana only, and you're recusing from the Green Valley et al. Property ID 3219.
Yes, as to that
correct?
one parcel. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let me just make a note of that. Montano. Montano? I'll come back to you. Paul?
Aye.
Perales? I'll mark him as absent. Simidian?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Hendricks?
Yes.
I'll come back to Member Perales. All right, I'm sorry. Member Montano. Member Montano, I will, hang on. Member Montano, please accept and mute on your phone.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passed, Chair.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. I'm moving on to number 5, committee reports, and we do not have any committee reports today, which is going to take us to the consent calendar, item 6. Items 6.1 through 6.6 and item 7.2, which for as part of orders of the day, we move to the consent calendar. Members of the public who would like to address the board on any item on consent, please raise your hand now in the app or press *9 on your phone. To my colleagues, is there anyone who would like to pull or an item or add any more items to the consent agenda? Supervisor Smitty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to be recorded as a no vote on item 6.4 and as an abstention on item 6.5, please. Thank you.
Okay. I'm not seeing anything else. Let's go ahead and go to members of the public and have them speak. Thalia, could we do that, please?
Yes, Chair. Before we go to the public, I'd like to note for the record that we did receive public comment from the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition for item 6.5. Blair, you may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. I hope we can begin to think of how the in some of the I'm not finding my speech. There's supposed to be in the spirit, please work to work on the light rail and bus bridge shuttle service along First Street in San Jose between Tasman and downtown. All the other light rail stations are next to and connect to VTA bus transit routes. The First Street corridor has many businesses, local, county, and government agencies, low-income and high-income residents that are extremely far from the nearest bus stop and bus transit service at this time. The light rail needs help along this First Street corridor. Please offer its help. Thank you. This was for issues around the financial year 2021.
Roland, you may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to second Director Simichian. As I recall it, Phase 4 essentially is going to make it possible for the 101 express lane to, bypass the timing lights that's basically controlling the amount of traffic that we're dumping from northbound 101 to northbound Highway 85. And all you're going to be doing is to add more congestion because that's going to dump right there into the 85, 87 bottleneck that I'm entirely familiar with because I live down there. And at some point, we're going to have to start spending money on so-called solutions that create more congestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the last of our public speakers. So I'm going to close the public speaker section. Are there any other comments from my colleagues? Director Smitty, do you still have your hand up?
Apologies.
No problem. I'm not seeing any comments or questions, so may I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
So that was moved by Constantine and seconded by Bert. Elaine, could you please do a roll call vote?
Bert,
Yes.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Chavez,
Yes.
Constantine,
Aye.
Jimenez,
Aye.
Ricardo,
Aye.
Montano. I'll come back to you. Paul,
Aye.
Peralez.
Yes.
Member Sumilian, I note that you're voting no on 6.4 and abstaining on 6.5, but the rest of the consent, what is your vote, please?
On the remainder of the consent calendar, my vote is an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Jones,
Aye.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me just make sure that member Montano is unmuted. Please accept the unmute. Your vote on consent, please. I'm
Aye.
sorry, I didn't.
Mrs.
Thank you.
Montano.
I heard you. Thank you so much. The motion passed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This is going to take us to our regular agendas. Our first item on the agenda is 7.1, which is to approve the business plan goals. John S., our senior transportation planner, is going to present this item. John, you have the floor. John, are you there? If you're speaking, we're not hearing you yet.
Pardon, Chair, we're having some technical issues right now.
Not a
Please.
problem.
All right, John, I think you're unmuted now.
Okay, great. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
John.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So what we're asking today is the VTA board to approve the goals for the business plan. Next slide. Really where this started was the business plan is really a direct result of the work that was done through the Board Enhancement Committee and the board itself to adopt the VTA strategic plan back in 2016. One of the main things that the strategic plan identified was 3 business lines. So the 3 business lines are fast, frequent, reliable transit, delivering projects and programs, and transportation system management. And they're kind of the guiding force behind development of these goals. Next slide. The progress that we made so far is that we were directed by the Government and Audit Committee to work with CMPP to develop the goals for the business plan. Adding that with internal VTA dialogue, we took this item to the advisory committees and the CMPP in May of 2021. All the committees approved the item. And after the goals development, what we will be working on is the accompanying strategies that go along with those. Next slide, please. The feedback we received from the advisory committee from the advisory committees really kind of follows these bullets up there. I won't read every single bullet, but what we wanted to do is note that as we move forward to strategy development, we are going to be considering all these that were asked of us to do at the advisory committees. One of the areas that we really want to focus on, and this was really brought up at the advisory committees, was trying to incorporate equity through the business plan. While we don't have a standalone goal for equity, what we want to do is use the strategy development portion to actually ingrain that throughout the document. There are other things that we're doing in relation to the environment. The board, in your consent calendar, you actually approved the sustainability plan. We want to use that as we move forward with the development of those strategies. Next slide. The first business line is fast, frequent, and reliable transit. The goals that we have in here are to increase transit speed, really want to focus on frequency of our service, both bus and light rail, maximize our service planning efforts, constantly look at revamping our service when needed. One thing that the COVID crisis taught us was that we need to be prepared for any event that may happen in the future, then we have to be ready for it. Developing mobility solutions speaks to finding first and last mile transit connections, as well as looking at ways we can move the public through other means besides our bus and light rail service. Enhancing transit-oriented land uses really speaks to the property that VTA owns at our light rail stations. Looking at ways that we can increase the value of the property and the best way to do that. And customer service speaks to a platform we're trying to develop, which is customer experience, which is really focusing on the needs of the customer base and how we improve our transit service based on the feedback we receive from them. Next slide. Business line 2 really speaks to delivering projects and programs. The goals that we have here are to stay on scope, schedule, and budget, streamline our project delivery process. And this really talks about making sure we deliver projects with little change to them. When we're developing projects, focus on the needs of the community as well as environmental considerations. To look at implementing multimodal improvements, this really talks about focusing more on public right-of-way, focusing on moving people through biking, walking, and other means. Well, Doing things on the roadway, improving automobile time is things we need. I think we need to really begin focusing on the other areas as well. We need to look at developing revenue generating strategies and really focusing on other ways we can generate revenue to deliver projects and programs, securing sustainable funding, working through our legislative process to identify other sources of funding that we can access to deliver projects. And lastly, to increase member agency communication, really talking about as we develop and deliver projects, keeping our member agencies involved in the loop throughout the entire process. We've already begun to reach out to various cities through our land use program, where we set up regular meetings with our member agencies to discuss projects and programs that VTA is pursuing. Next slide. Business line 3 speaks to transportation system management, really looking at maximizing the O&M of our system, preparing for our fleet conversion as we are pledged to the federal government to move to electric buses by 2040, to really find a way to get there, focusing on congestion management. As VTA is not just a transit authority, we're also the congestion management agency, focusing our efforts onto relieving traffic congestion, advancing our express lane program. One of the things that we intend to do with the express lane program once developed is to use some of the revenue generated from that and to put it back into our transit system. And looking at key technology improvements that we can advance in the future. Next slide. So really what we're trying to do is finalize these goals this month, but the real work will actually come through the summer and through the fall. As we just kind of highlighted the goals, one of the things we need to do is really look at the strategies to them. And some of the feedback we receive from our member agencies will help us do that. Things such as possibly looking at identifying targets that we can reach through there, incorporating equity in the environment, and seeing how VTA is set up as an agency to help us deliver the business lines. And we're looking at a development of the financial plan through the end of the year, the early part of next year, and adoption of the final business plan in February of 2022. And with that, that ends my presentation, and I'll be happy to take comments, questions, and feedback.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. I apologize. Before I go to my colleagues, let's go ahead and go to our public speakers. So Thalia, could you handle them for us, please?
I have 3 speakers. Eugene, you may begin speaking when ready.
Good morning, everybody. Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit Users. Just reading some of the business plan that VTA has. One thing that's been gnawing at me just reading this business plan, as VTA is not only just a transit provider, it's also a road builder, congestion management agency. Some of the goals that VTA has tend to contradict themselves. Perfect example, along Highway 237, VTA removed the 330 bus line that served it, and then at the same time added new toll lanes to it. Some of those, even before the pandemic, had already been started to become more clogged up. So my question would be, how will this business plan be able to handle such conflicts that VTA has in both a transit provider and a road builder? That would be the one question that I would like to have answered here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Eugene. Our next speaker is Roland. You may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the advantages that members of the public have over board meetings is that members of the public can say things that probably many members of this board are thinking, but obviously would never be able to say. What I'm going to say is that this is about the most useless presentation I've seen in a long, long time. And in closing, my question through the chair is, when is this agency going to stop wasting the board and members of the public time on these kinds of presentations? Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Blair. You may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Roland's first words were nice about how the public can help out committee persons make things easier to say and understand. With that said, I hope you really take the equity issues really seriously. And like with your bike pedestrian issues that was on today's consent calendar, really talk to the east side, work with people, and go for the really important beginning ideas of what equity is about, please. Thank you. My time today has been how we can help, again, develop a more positive long-term future for the VTA light rail and reconsider ideas how it can be the center of a county with green sustainability. Future VTA transit lines more centered around the light rail is one idea, and that we can begin to consider ideas like an automated vehicle system initially planned to replace the light rail to instead begin to focus with what can be useful experimentation, much useful experimentation on the underground tunnel system, shuttle system, currently being considered between the future of Diridon Station and the San Jose Airport. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Our final speaker is Monica. You may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, this is Monica Mallon from Turnout for Transit. I really appreciate the work that has been done on this, and I think this is really important. But I would just like to see more metrics for ridership and mode share in the goals, and would really like to see some sort of service vision be included in this, maybe further down the line. Something kind of similar to what Caltrain did as part of their business plan. I participated in that process, and something that really gave me a lot of hope for the future, and I think it's something that would be really great to do at VTA as well. You know, especially with the regional measure coming up, I think it's really important to be aspirational here. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last of our public speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public speaker section and come back to my colleagues. And Director Liccardo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, first I just want to say I appreciated the comments of Monica Mallon. I think that having metrics and goals would be really important here around everything from ridership to mode share. And so I'd certainly support that if there's an opportunity to amend this. I had another concern, which was the reason why I raised my hand, which is, you know, as we consider what is one of the very significant existential threats to the agency is just our fiscal sustainability. We've got a chronic deficit now. We have extremely low fare box return, and I didn't see anything in the list of goals under business line 1 in particular, which is the fast, frequent, reliable transit, that would refer to cost effectiveness, improving fare box return, reducing costs, improving efficiency, whatever it might take to make us more financially, fiscally sustainable. And so I think it's really important that it be in there, because it has to be a driving concern for us at a time when we know obviously we have federal money now, but that money's going to run out at some point. And we've got to figure out how to be able to run a bus and still pay for it.
Thank you. Does staff have any response of how we'd be able to incorporate the long-term financial sustainability into this?
The board can make a recommendation to include that as part of one of the goals for business line 1, and we'd be happy to include that.
Okay, I'm happy to listen to my colleagues, and I'll make a motion if nobody else does.
Yeah, Director Burt.
So I share Mayor Liccardo's concerns on the financial sustainability, and I'd also like to hear from either staff or the committee any thoughts on our ability to include metrics. We certainly can't establish them today for this approval. So if we have that interest, what would be the process to do so, and what are the staff and committee's thoughts on the merits of that?
Staff, do you have any response to that?
Sure. As I mentioned in the presentation, one of the things that we need to do next is identify those strategies. And as we do the strategy development, we can definitely include metrics or targets, however you want to include that as we move forward with the development of the business plan.
Okay, thanks.
Hey,
Was that
Glenn,
Evelyn?
this
Yeah.
is Rebecca.
Oh, okay.
I just thought I would mention, as your Auditor General's office, we do have a project on our work plan related to long-term fiscal sustainability, and that's in this current work plan that we're working on. So that'll be in the FY 21-22 deliverables that we give you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deborah, you have your hand up.
Yes,
Is that a response to
thank
something?
you, Chair Hendricks. I did also want to offer a perspective that this particular business plan is related to the 2017-2022 strategic plan. So we were also trying to fit the goals into the 3 business lines as are currently defined. And so these comments, we are trying to figure out how to put them in. So we did try and put that into the business line 2. And as John reported, we will flesh these out within the strategies, so we will look at that. I also want to mention that we are coming up on the time when we will be looking at our next round of strategic plan, the strategic plan should be starting in 2023, which means 2022, which is only 6 months away, is when we need to be starting that strategic plan process. And so in that concept is we probably need to think about the structure of the strategic plan being in such a way that these kind of financial considerations is more explicit rather than being buried in business lines. And so that's something we're learning as we're developing these goals, is how to restructure our next strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. Next is Director Smithian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to associate myself with the remarks and the views expressed by Member Liccardo and Member Pat Burt, both as to the incorporation of financial sustainability and metrics in particular. And if and when there's a motion to that effect, I'll support it. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, you've got your hand up. Is there something you wanted to add? Looks like you're not quite unmuted yet.
Chair, it might be just an error. I'll go ahead and text her.
Okay, cool. I see some people still have some hands up. What I've got from this is that when a motion's coming, we definitely want to be making sure that metrics are defined through the process, not that we're going to necessarily define them right now, and that we want to make sure we're taking do something to include in this, that we're looking into the long-term financial sustainability of what goes on. I'm not seeing any other hands up with comments or questions. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion, Director Liccardo?
Yes, Chair, I'll make the motion. I support both having the metrics and identifying how we can have long-term financial stability. So I will make that motion.
Okay, I'm seeing that from Vice Chair Jones. Director Liccardo?
Thank you. I'd be happy to second it. I just ask if Vice Chair Jones would be willing to specify that the financial sustainability would be part of an element under the first category of goals.
Yes, I accept it.
Okay,
Great,
so we had a motion, friendly amendment, seconded by Director Liccardo. Are there any other comments or questions that people have? If Director Burt.
Just if we could see the written motion, the revised.
Chair, this is Elaine. We only have the written motion on the PowerPoint, but if you guys don't mind, I will just read it for you based on my notes.
Including the revisions in particular. That's
yes.
what I really want to have clarity on.
Okay, so the motion is to adopt the business plan goals with the following amendments to include metrics which will be defined through a process that will be determined, include the long-term financial sustainability as part of goal number 1. Did I understand that correctly?
If I could offer a slight tweak, it would be that financial sustainability would be one of, well, I can't tell if there are 3 goals, if there are multiple goals within each subcategory, but it would be one of the explicit items listed among the goals under business line 1. That was the suggestion.
Do you have that, Elaine?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I've not seen any other comments or questions. I think, Sam, your hand is still just up. If I'm not seeing any other comments or questions, could we please have a roll call vote?
Burt,
Yes.
Carrasco. I'll come back to you.
Aye.
Chavez. Oh, thank
Aye.
you. Chavez,
Yes.
Constantine.
Aye.
Thank you. Jimenez. I'll come back to you. Ricardo.
Aye.
Yes.
Montan.
I think that was Jimenez saying yes.
Okay. Thank you. Montano.
Yes.
Paul.
Aye.
Perales.
Yes.
Semidian.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Item 7.2 was approved as part of our consent calendar, which is going to take us to 7.3. This is to receive an update on Plan Bay Area 2050, the new regional plan for transportation, housing, the economy, and the environment, slated for adoption in the fall of 2021. Dave Boughton, Assistant Director, Major Plans from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, is going to provide the presentation. So, Dave, it looks like we're going to let you have the floor. And just before we go on, I want to double check. Sam, is your hand just still up from before?
Actually, it's a point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying close enough attention, realizing that 7.2 is incorporating consent. Is there an appropriate time in which I can raise a question after the fact on that item 7.2?
I'm going to let my general counsel look at me and tell me what we could go ahead and do.
Glenn, you can entertain the comments from Member Liccardo at this point. I'm not quite sure actually if it was a comment or whether there was some sort of request for action on that.
Well,
There was a question.
Let's go ahead and hold on. We'll hold 7.3 and Sam, go ahead.
Okay, I'm very sorry to throw a stick in the works here. And I'd be happy if you want me to make a motion to recall the item, I'm happy to do that. In any event, the question was just very straightforward around the project labor agreement requirements. I know there's been ongoing concern about the breadth of these, and in City of San Jose, when we negotiated this, we did have a carve out for affordable housing projects that was negotiated. And I know that's of particular concern to affordable housing builders in terms of their ability to be able to meet their targets as required under the grant agreements and so forth. Is there any risk that this PLA would apply to affordable housing projects constructed by third parties on land currently or formerly owned by VTA?
I can answer that question, and our outside counsel is coming back on if there's more questions from Member Liccardo. But there is a carve out for our joint development program. So none of the projects that are included in our joint development program would be subject to the PLA.
Great, thank you. That answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, so it looks like, Sam, you're comfortable with that and that answered your question, that we can move on?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's going to take us back to 7.3. I'm not going to repeat everything I just said, other than, Dave, you now have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us today. As mentioned, I'm Dave Vaughton with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Association of Bay Area Governments, and I'm happy to be here to present Draft Plan Bay Area 2050 to all of you. Next slide, please. And next slide. So just to provide a quick overview of what Plan Bay Area is, Plan Bay Area 2050 is the next generation regional long-range plan for the 9-county region. It's slated for adoption by the MTC and ABAG boards in the fall. This plan has been under development for 3.5 years with a defined vision established in 2019 to ensure that the Bay Area by 2050 is affordable, connected, diverse, healthy, and vibrant, not just for some residents, but for all of our residents. The plan includes 4 elements. It is more cross-cutting than ever before, linking together the puzzle pieces of transportation, housing, economic development, and the environment. At the core of the plan are the strategies. These are public policies or investments that can help move us forward in the years ahead. Next slide. Prior to the kickoff of Plan Bay Area 2050, MTC and ABAG completed a 2-year initiative known as Horizon. This effort stress tested strategies against a wide range of future conditions, knowing that the future is highly uncertain. And in fact, even though this was conducted before COVID, we even studied a future for the region with high levels of telecommuting. So we actually got a sense of how public policies would be impacted by that changing force. We looked at dozens of other forces as well, and the strategies that became part of what is known as the blueprint for Plan Bay Area 2050 performed well against a wide range of conditions and helped to advance equity across our region. Next slide. Public engagement has been critical throughout the process. We've had hundreds of public meetings and events, and we've received over 220,000 public comments from over 19,000 Bay Area residents. We've used more diverse engagement tactics than ever before, focusing our efforts in low-income communities of color who often do not have as strong of a voice in the regional planning process. Next slide. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of the plan and then talk about some of the implementation actions for the years ahead. So the first aspect of the plan is really about where we grow and where we don't grow. We anticipate the region will grow by 1.4 million new households and 1.4 million new jobs by the year 2050. At the same time, we want to protect critical areas outside of urban growth boundaries and in unmitigated high hazard areas. And so to do this, we can focus growth in locally nominated priority development areas and priority production areas, which are key locations for housing and jobs, as well as regionally designated transit-rich and high resource areas in jurisdictions that have not nominated a significant number of priority growth places. And this map on the right shows that combination of different growth geographies, which account for the vast majority of all future growth in the region in Plan Bay Area 2050. Next slide. But just as important as where we grow is how we do it. And that's what the strategies in the plan are all about. So across the 4 elements of the plan, there are 11 themes underneath which sit the 35 strategies. The transportation element of the plan focuses on maintaining and optimizing the existing system, creating healthier and safe streets, and building a $100 billion plus next generation transit network. The housing element of the plan includes strategies related to the 3 P's of housing: protection, preservation, and production, while creating more inclusive communities. The economy element of the plan focuses on strategies to improve economic mobility and shift the location of jobs to get a better jobs housing balance throughout our 9 counties. And the environment element of the plan includes strategies to reduce risks from hazards, expand parks and open space, and importantly, reduce climate emissions. Next slide. So let me talk about some of the highlights in terms of advancing those 5 guiding principles established based on tens of thousands of public comments. So first, the draft plan would help reduce the region's extreme cost of living by enabling more than 1 million new homes near public transit, and in particular, high quality, frequent public transit. It would produce and preserve much needed affordable housing through action by the public sector, but also by the nonprofit and private sectors as well. On the transportation front, the plan advances affordability by providing more robust discounts for low-income residents, both for tolls and for transit fares. Next slide. To make the area more connected, strategies include creating a world-class public transportation system, both better maintaining the system, but also working to grow ridership in the post-COVID context. This includes optimizing our system by standardizing transit fares across the region and creating schedule-coordinated hubs for seamless connections between operators. And our region's roadways, we know that highway widening has not provided long-term congestion relief. And so a key strategy in the plan is to permanently reduce traffic congestion on our region's freeways through a proven approach of pricing corridors that have robust transit alternatives. Next slide. We all value our region's diversity. We'd like to see that continue to grow in the future. So to do so, the plan includes strategies to protect renters from being displaced to the region's periphery and beyond by strengthening renter protections and preserving existing affordable units. It incorporates high resource areas as key places for future growth, which will help us tackle racial inequities by enabling more housing in places that have been historically exclusionary. And to address income inequality, it includes strategies to provide a statewide universal basic income and to provide mortgage assistance programs for low-income buyers. Next slide. To improve the health of residents and the environment, the draft plan strives to eliminate traffic deaths by building over 10,000 miles of protected bike lanes and trails across the region. It includes a $19 billion proposal to protect tens of thousands of Bay Area homes from rising sea levels and new strategies to protect from earthquake damage. And to tackle climate change, there are new increased investments in clean vehicles, as well as energy upgrades for buildings and travel demand management programs. Next slide. Finally, to ensure that the region's economy recovers and that we have a more vibrant Bay Area in the future, the plan includes strategies to encourage more job growth in housing-rich areas by providing incentives to employers and by allowing more commercial growth in those locations. It also works to preserve critical industrial lands through the Priority Production Area program and establish job training and incubator programs on those sites. And it would work to ensure that all communities have access to high-speed internet so they can participate in the digital economy. Next slide. So let me talk a little bit about Santa Clara County and how the strategies relate. And obviously there are 35 strategies, so I won't be able to talk about the nexus between Santa Clara and every strategy, but I wanted to highlight 4 of them in particular. So starting with transportation, strategy T11 is all about expanding and modernizing the regional rail network. So this strategy has tens of billions of dollars of investments in Santa Clara County. And it all starts with the completion of BART to Silicon Valley, to Dearden Station and Santa Clara, as well as improved infrastructure and frequencies in the Caltrain corridor that will help support connecting high-speed rail to San Jose and San Francisco. And station upgrades at Dearden Station. It also includes transformational investments in the VTA light rail network, including a downtown subway and grade separations along the North San Jose section of the line, and a new extension to Cupertino. Strategy H6, which would transform aging malls and office parks into neighborhoods, would be particularly impactful in the South Bay, with all of the 20th century malls that are really ripe for redevelopment into more mixed-use, walkable communities. Strategy EC4 would allow greater commercial densities in growth geographies, and this would enable more job growth in Santa Clara County to cluster within walking distance of transit and make our transit system more successful, shift more folks out of their cars, and also create new job opportunities. And lastly, strategy EC9, which would expand transportation demand management programs, could be particularly influential in a county with major technology employers, help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and encourage more folks to carpool, vanpool, and use bike share. Next slide. The plan in total across the 35 strategies would total to approximately $1.4 trillion. The transportation element would be about 80% funded with existing funding sources, with the remainder coming from new, reasonably anticipated revenue sources. However, there are more significant funding gaps outside of transportation, including for affordable housing, economic development, and environmental resilience. And the bottom line here is that new federal, state, regional, county, and local monies will be necessary to realize the vision in this plan. Next slide. Now, what might the strategies mean in terms of the growth pattern in the region? These charts here show housing growth and job growth over the next 35 years and the share that each county would take on. On the left, you'll see that Santa Clara County would account for roughly 1/3 of all future housing in the region if the strategies are implemented, with another third occurring in the East Bay and the remainder primarily in the Peninsula and San Francisco, with more limited growth in the North Bay. On the right, you'll see that the job growth pattern closely mirrors the housing growth. There's similarly roughly about 1/3 of future job growth anticipated in Santa Clara County, 1/3 in the East Bay, and the remainder primarily in San Francisco and in the Peninsula. Importantly, 4 out of 5 new housing units and 3 out of 5 new jobs would be within a short walk of high-frequency transit. Next slide. Some other key outcomes to highlight if the strategies are advanced over the next 30 years. We project that the plan would be able to reduce the housing and transportation cost burden for a typical household by 13 percentage points. So 13% of a typical household income reduction as a result of advancing primarily the housing strategies in the plan. And there would be even greater improvements for low-income households. The plan would also enable nearly 20% of workers to shift away from driving to work and take advantage of alternative modes, including transit, walking, biking, and telecommuting. It would also provide more affordable housing in those historically exclusionary jurisdictions, especially compared to prior iterations of Plan Bay Area, and help at least 10% of the region's low-income residents buy their first home. The plan meets the state-mandated greenhouse gas reduction target while concurrently protecting 98% of homes from sea level rise impacts through 2050. And it would improve jobs housing balance in counties throughout the Bay Area, shortening commutes for workers across the income spectrum. Next slide. So this slide isn't displaying entirely correctly, but what it should be showing up there is the 30-year strategies translating into the 5-year near-term implementation actions. So now that the plan has been advanced into the environmental phase as of January, and now that we've released the draft EIR and draft plan, we're starting to think about how to implement the strategies. And so the near-term implementation plan focuses on what MTC and ABAG might do to advance each strategy in the plan through 2025, identifying areas where we have abilities today and where gaps exist for authority, financial resources, technical capacity, and public and political support, and identifying an appropriate role, whether that's leading, partnering, or supporting. We're also moving into the partnership phase where we work closely with partners like VTA to think through the roles that our partners can play and how we can work with our partners to advance each strategy as well. Next slide. So what are some of the actions that MTC and ABAG are considering committing to advance these 35 strategies? Well, it all starts with seeking new revenues. Of course, there's a lot of exciting opportunities on that front on the federal and state level at the moment, but also considering new revenues at the regional scale in the years ahead. We're looking at ways to improve our strategic alignment within our organizations to make sure all of our initiatives are moving in the same direction and that are as efficient as possible. In the transportation space, we will be working to implement the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Transit Recovery Task Force, the Fare Integration Task Force, and complete the Regional Active Transportation Plan, while leading a next generation's freeways study to further explore pricing our region's freeways while investing in complementary strategies like express bus services and other mitigations. Next slide. In the housing space, our organizations will be working on providing more financial resources and technical assistance to local jurisdictions as they move forward with their housing elements, launching and delivering a suite of pilot projects to advance each of the 3 Ps of housing, and partnering with local jurisdictions to study and accelerate mall and office park redevelopment proposals. In the economic space, one key action to highlight here would be the development of funding and also a program to support some of these priority production areas with a goal of doing 5 priority production plans by 2025 and partnering with local jurisdictions on economic recovery as well. And lastly, in the environment space, we're looking to advance some legislative reforms to establish clear roles for sea level rise adaptation, restructure the climate initiatives program that MTC currently runs, and evaluate the feasibility of expanding the work of the Bay REN program, the Regional Energy Network, to support building retrofits and more. There are over 70 implementation actions incorporated in the plan to mirror the 35 strategies, and I've just skimmed the surface today, but hopefully this gives you a sense of some of the projects and efforts MTC and ABAG will be undertaking in the years ahead. Next slide. So we are conducting public engagement on the draft Plan Bay area, the draft implementation plan, the draft DIR, and the draft supplemental reports at this time. We actually just held the Santa Clara County virtual workshop yesterday. We have 2 more virtual public workshops with a geographic focus. Of course, Santa Clara County residents are welcome at any of the events. We also are holding regional public hearings. There will be several more of those occurring. You can see the dates and times below. There's overview videos online. Comments are accepted online, by mail, and by phone. Next slide. And with that, I will wrap up. The plan remains out for public review through July 20th. After that, we will be taking all of those comments, reviewing them, responding to them, and incorporating revisions in advance of the bringing forward the final Plan Bay Area 2050 to the MTC and ABAG boards in the fall. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
So Dave, thanks very much. You know, it's a shame your plan doesn't have very many elements to it. Before I go to my colleagues, let's go ahead and do our public comments first. So Thalia, would you go ahead and let our speakers in?
Yes. We have 3 speakers, Eugene, followed by Roland and Blair. Eugene, you may begin speaking when ready.
Morning once again, board members. This is Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit users. It's good to see that at least with this Bay Area 2050 plan that there are actually some numeric metrics that to go on as goals, which unlike which lacks something that which has some of the VTA's so-called strategic plan doesn't have. One concern though, just looking at this Bay Area Plan Bay Area 2050 plan that I didn't see a lot of was increases in local bus service. This especially how VTA's reduced that local bus service literally over the last 20 years. While it's great that the goals include seamless Bay Area in terms of transit connections and sustainability, it does no good to continue to see really the lack of local bus service, the so-called last mile between major bus line, light rail, heavy rail, etc. So I'd like to see that in the Plan Bay Area 2050 plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Thank you, Eugene. Roland, you may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to forward you the exchanges I've had with Dave over the last year or so. My comment is essentially that this plan is fatally flawed because it is still based on the antiquated concept that the geographical boundaries of the plan are somehow limited to counties who happen to have a beach somewhere in the bay, while it has now become eminently clear from slide number 14 that the center of economic activity has shifted south to Santa Clara County. The end result is massive affordable single-family homes in San Benito counties and others, freeway widening supported by Measure B, which will result in dumping 5 lanes of traffic into 3 lanes of northbound 101 south of Gilroy. In closing, I'm asking that the plan's geographical boundaries be expanded to align with the Office of Management and Budget, San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco Combined Statistical Area. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker, please.
Yes, our final speaker is Blair. You may begin speaking when ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. To acknowledge the words of Chairman Hendricks, thank you for this item. You know, it was really interesting to me how much you actually are talking about sea level rise, climate change preparedness, and possible earthquake preparedness issues. We have issues that in the first part up to 2023 and this first part of this decade, I think we have to be preparing for things. And so thank you. It's our good prep now that, we're kind of in a lull time if we are facing these serious issues by 2023 and into the first part of this decade. We can't do our greatest work, but if we offer our good practices and our good persons, I think we can create something pretty special at this time and build the second part of this decade into something awesome and transition out of disaster things better. So good luck how we move and think at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was our last speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public speaker section of this. Do any of my colleagues have any thoughts or comments or questions they'd like to share? Member Paul.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think I want to kind of couch my comments in a framework of talking first about innovation. I think it's important that we look to the future and try to figure out what makes sense in terms of how we build out our system in the future. But if we're talking about modernizing a system of transit that we have right now, it would be good to get a little bit more specific about what types of incentives we're creating in order to build out that system. Rather than just saying that we're going to take an existing system and somehow modernize it, I think we should be thinking about creating incentives to be able to allow us to explore other types of transit, because it's really those other types of transit that will give us just a remote chance of being able to interconnect our various communities in a way such that we don't have to worry once the economy starts booming again about how we're going to go 5 miles in 1 hour, because that's really inevitably what we're going down, even if we refine everything. And so I think if we're thinking about this from the point of view of efficacy, we have to acknowledge that when you look at how we have developed as an innovation economy, some local communities do create conditions that are attracting our innovators. And I'm not saying that we set everything in amber and try to say that there are no inequities to be corrected, but I think we really need to take a look at some of the practical accountabilities of how we go about achieving those underlying equities in a pragmatic manner. And so I want to, having set that framework, talk about 3 areas that we really need to, I think, be more focused upon if we're indeed going to be sitting here in 30 years thinking that, okay, 30 years ago, we thought about things that would help us get to success. Because a lot of this is being driven by economic considerations that are not really looking at how do we solve problems. They are putatively saying, okay, let's try to solve this problem, but in fact, they're looking out more for their own bottom line. So first and foremost, public health and safety. I noticed that the presenter here talked about a mall in my own jurisdiction, Valco, but are we acknowledging the fact that the local authority with regard to reviewing the particular plan that's right now in front of us for the state mandate of SB 35 actually worsens the housing crisis because of the fact that it has almost 2 million square feet of office space. But in the marketing materials, they only talk about the housing. The housing is insufficient by half to meet the office space. And so, what I worry about with regard to public health and safety is that we're going to get caught up in this idea of the marketing for the bottom line of development. And so let us not get into a point where we're compromising things like, okay, it's all ministerial review. Let's go ahead and sweep under the rug things like making sure that we have environmental cleanup and that we have police accessibility and fire safety. So that's really important. Second, solvency. How are we going to pay for all of this? Yes, it is very expensive to live in certain areas, but we can't, simply wave a magic wand and try to figure out, okay, these are X numbers of how many jobs we're going to create in the next 30 years, and these are X numbers of how many housing units we're going to create. How do we actually create incentives to pay for this? Because at the end of the day, There are certain areas that are, the housing is less expensive. And if we're really a transit agency, we should be trying to figure out how to get people from A to B in the best possible, most innovative way. Finally, all of this, I think, is we've woven together by accountability for efficacy. Again, in 30 years, what are our metrics going to be to try to figure out whether we have been successful in trying to implement? I mean, I think it would be a shame if we spent a generation essentially being pulled around by the strings of financial concerns. And, frankly, that is something that has happened in the last 5-10 years. We need to be much more careful about how we're going to go forward and how we're going to endorse the principles of a plan like this, which I will absolutely acknowledge are grounded in really good intentions. But at the end of the day, if we're sitting here in 30 years and our transit system is not making us effective in being able to bring people from point A to point B, and we have worsening conditions that we scapegoat certain communities for creating, when in fact they were actually the entire way trying to hold us to accountable metrics, then I think we're getting to a point where we're just asking for almost permanent type of trouble. So at this point, it's really important to acknowledge the intentions of this, but I wonder, can we think about things like, how do we promote innovation? How do we really solve these problems? And when it comes down to these issues of equity, let's get on the ground and figure out, how are we going to get all of these affordable units, and how are we going to incentivize the build? How are we going to work with communities that actually want more affordable housing, but are aware of the economic pressures? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'll go to Director Burt.
Thanks, and I concur with a lot of what Director Paul has said. I think the plan has a lot of really valuable vision and elements to it, but there's a few things that I think are of very fundamental concern. So as Director Paul talked about, we tend to place the housing demand and need in isolation and separate from what's inducing the demand in terms of job growth in specific regions. And whether the first, that the job growth needs to be shared and benefiting the outlying areas as much as the core areas who have until the last year and a quarter were really struggling with a surplus in job growth that was exacerbating the housing challenges and frankly the infrastructure needs to go along with the jobs and housing growth. And so I did have a couple questions for the presenter. One is, he alluded to that the plan had initially, even before the pandemic, and what we now seem to have is a widely accepted anticipation of changing work patterns, even if we don't have clarity on what a hybrid work model range will look like in the coming years. So I heard that they had looked at remote work, but has the plan been modified in any way to reflect what is now strongly accepted anticipation of changing work patterns from a hybrid model?
So yes and yes. So first of all, we actually analyzed all of our transportation investments and all of the strategies in the plan against a telecommuting level that is at or above what we would expect after COVID. So that was a really interesting scenario that was explored that actually proved super beneficial as we went into COVID in 2020. The other thing is we have been iterating on the blueprint for the plan between February of 2020 and January of 2021. So the blueprint was basically developed while everyone was working from home in the COVID environment. What this meant is that we were able to update our growth forecasts, we updated our telecommute assumptions, and those assumptions affect things like office space demands and residential preferences. So COVID impacts based on what we know today. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the future, but based on the best information available at the time in 2020 and into the early part of this year, have been incorporated into the draft plan.
All right. Well, as a follow-up to this meeting, I'd like to be able to see specifically what those changes were. I don't think this is the forum to dig into those details, both in terms of the anticipated growth needs and population growth and the work patterns. And I appreciate that you alluded to the real challenges on affordable housing funding. In communities like ours, we've downzoned in our commercial areas to some degree. We're anticipating doing so even more. And we've upzoned significantly for market rate housing and even further upzoning for affordable housing. But that provides certain incentives, but the subsidy requirements are just overwhelming. Even though we're going to be increasing affordable housing impact fees to some of the higher in the region, and looking at a business tax in part to support affordable housing, those two significant increases in our local funding would not come close to meeting the demand that is being imposed on cities like ours through the RENA allocations, which are, almost a 25% housing growth in the next 8 years, and 57% of that moderate or low-income housing. And one of the things that I have not seen in the plan is a recognition that in cities with high land value, moderate income housing must be subsidized to occur. We've always thought of low-income housing requiring subsidy, but we recognize that we have to have it at a moderate level, or for the moderate income housing as well, at land values of $15 million an acre and so. So to what degree has the plan recognized that it is fundamentally infeasible to achieve the outcomes absent some very drastic changes in the subsidies that are available for low income and moderate income housing?
Well, I think what the plan acknowledges is that we need to get started on looking for sources to fill a $346 billion funding gap. Now, the good news is that President Biden's jobs plan actually treats affordable housing like infrastructure, and there are proposals that have been incorporated in there to help fund affordable housing. But it's also likely that the region is going to need to step up, and not just with local measures or county measures, but with a new regional measure for affordable housing. And that is what the Bay Area Housing Financing Authority is all about. And that's one of the hats that MTC and ABAG wears. It's recently created and has the ability in the future to put forward a measure for voters to start filling some of these significant affordable housing gaps. So that may be something to keep an eye on in the years ahead as we try to address this crisis of affordable housing in our region.
Yeah, so that is an incredible gap. But
excuse me, Director Burt. Are some of these things, are these things that you could take offline and have additional discussions with Dave and MTC? I'm just trying to look at overall timing of where we're at.
I'd be glad to. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not meaning to cut you off. I was just trying to see if we can get to where we're going.
No, I appreciate that.
Is there anybody else who has any thoughts or comments? So Dave, I want to thank you for coming and sharing what's going on. There are clearly a lot of moving parts of what goes on. I think, I'll just succinctly say, I think there's going to be lots of questions to be looked at over time as it relates to implementation and financing. Two items I'm sure you're clear. There's always lots of questions about, but we really appreciate you coming down and sharing your information with us. This is an information item for us, so there's no motion or anything. And once again, I really want to thank you for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Next, I'm going to move on to item 7.4, which is to receive an update on the Silicon Valley Rapid Transit Program. Takis Selpias, the BART Silicon Valley Extension Project Chief, is going to provide a report to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good morning, board members. I go to page 2 of my presentation to update you on a few critical items. As you all know, FTA on May 15th accepted us officially and formally into the program. And we are expecting to see the notification from FTA to Congress September 11th. That is FTA's date when FTA is going to notify the Congress of their decision about our project. We continue working very closely with the VTA. We are in VTA, continue to work closely with FTA and their project management oversight. And we did several technical workshops with them. And we completed also the risk assessment, which was a week in May. The FTA headquarters leads a weekly meeting every Thursday at 10 o'clock. FTA headquarters has a meeting with us, Region 9 in San Francisco, and their own contractor. The first 2 topics we almost completed with them was our financial plan and the ridership. And now we're moving more to the technical aspects for them to complete the review of the application. Another piece, I would say, of great news, the lawsuit with the Sharks have been all dismissed, both at the federal and state level, and the project is free from that. Real estate acquisitions, you already got an update today from Ron Golem. You know very well what we're doing here. I think yesterday we took possession of the first real estate acquisition, and now we're gonna move, like Ron told you, there are 90 parcels which we need to complete between now and the end of next year to get this great project go. And the cooperative agreements, very pleased with the support from the elected officials in the city of San Jose, and of course the staff, which we've been working. For June 8th, City Council approved the cooperative agreement. Similar process, similar approach with the city of Santa Clara. July 13th, we're going to City Council, we will review and hopefully approve our agreement. And Caltrans, the final draft has been sent to us as approved by Caltrans, and our General Counsel's office is looking at, and we should finish our agreement with the state as well. Next page, Elaine. This is the typical page. I update you every month. I added here some bold dates. Some of you ask what is the next big actions by the board. Big actions, I took it as a word for major contracts for that. Next year, this time, we should award our systems contract, if not earlier. And of course, in the spring, we should award our tunnel contract. Couple quick updates here. You know, we already have a shortlisted 3 contractors, 3 contracting teams to be precise for the tunnel. And at the end of this month, in June, we're gonna do the same thing for the systems. And we're moving on with a yard and the station, a new whole yard, and of course, our 3 stations. Next page, please. Here is our framework. We've been updating this every month. We're still on target as we were planning, and that's my update. Any questions?
Takis, thank you very much. Before I go to questions from my colleagues, let's go ahead and open the public comment section first. Thalia, if we could just do our public speakers first.
Chair, before we go to the public, I'd like to note that we received written public comment from Mr. LeBrun, which has been posted on the agenda portal. We have 2 speakers, Roland followed by Blair. Roland, you may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you know what the plot thickens, because if you click on the presentation on the website, you're going to find my letter buried. So this presentation has actually got 6 slides on the website, not 4. But anyway, my comments essentially speak to the comments that Director Ricardo made earlier about financial sustainability and metrics. We should dedicate immediate rethinking of this project. Specifically, we've spent $4 billion so far, carrying 800 passengers a day, with an operating subsidy in excess of $300 per passenger. So the fare box recovery is essentially less than half of 1%. On the tunnel track work, I think a good question to ask Mr. Salpeus is, why is the tunneling going to start at the airport instead of starting at a Berryessa? And the answer is very simple. It's that that machine cannot possibly go under Coyote Creek or 101.
Thank you. And our next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Blair, followed by Eugene. Blair, you may begin speaking when ready.
Hi. Hi, Blair Beekman here. It took me a long time to get started on the last item. I had a few more thoughts. I'm sorry I couldn't complete them. Thank you very much for the speaker on the last item and its item itself. For this item, I wanted to quickly speak to, it takes a lot to work out eminent domain issues. Good luck in what the work that has to be done by everyone for this matter. Considering BART Phase II funding, I think it's much easier to fund BART Phase II ideas than other Measure B ideas. I hope that can be a perspective we all consider. And about the fare raising issues, the ATU really works to not raise fares. I think we should be looking at those ideas and respect those ideas at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker, please.
Yes, our final speaker is Eugene. You may begin speaking when ready.
Good morning once again, board members, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm echoing Roland's comments. One thing that I haven't seen so far really is just a cost breakdown of BART Phase II. I understand that it's well over $2 billion over budget. As voters of 2016 Measure B, we were told that costs would be controlled, and so far that appears not to be the case. VTA needs to be more honest and upfront with the public about how much both Phase I and especially Phase II really cost. It does no good for VTA and others to campaign for these measures when they haven't been honest about the true cost of having BART come down to our valley. Let's change that starting now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that was the last of our public speakers. So I'm going to close the public speaker section and come and to my colleagues, and I see Director Ricardo has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Takis, I just want to thank you and your team for all the great work on this. I want to know, our federal lobbyist isn't with us, I assume. Is that right? It's not here with us at this meeting?
No, he is not. He is not present.
Is it possible that for the next board meeting, we could have that person come back to the board or a member of their firm? I really want to understand better what exactly our federal lobbying team is doing for the agency on this project. And I think really it points to a larger issue, which is what are they doing in this critical moment when there is so much happening right now in Washington, D.C. around large funding decisions made for intercity rail, around infrastructure bill, around recovery and so forth. I'd really want to understand more because, bluntly, I'm a bit disappointed in my conversations with the administration, Department of Transportation in D.C., the Speaker Pelosi's office, that when House Republicans were going after this project publicly, I didn't see any activity from our lobbyists, and bluntly, I don't think they did either. And I don't recall ever getting a call, even though I had reached out saying, how can we help? How can we get involved? How can we do this? I don't recall ever being engaged in any way to say, hey, here's our strategy, and we need our local elected officials to do this, or we're going to try to get other mayors on board to do that. Or I just didn't see anything. And this is exactly the wrong moment not to see anything. And not just for this project, but for all of are potential opportunities at the federal level. And so I'd like to hear from our lobbyists. I really want to understand better why the folks I'm talking to in DC have no idea about what exactly our lobbyist is doing on our behalf. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we will be happy to have our federal lobbyists at your next meeting, and they can, excuse me, provide you with an update on their activity. Thank you for those comments, and we will take them to heart.
Thanks.
So, Jim, if I could also ask, would it be possible? I mean, let's see if we can get them on the next agenda. But our next board meeting is not till August. So, if possible, maybe there could be an interim update or something that could be sent directly to the board, so we're not having to wait that long to try and get Sam's questions addressed.
Mr. Chair, could I just follow up on that? Because I appreciate your point. I wasn't even mindful of that fact. You're absolutely right. Is there a possibility that maybe a small number of board members who are similarly interested in this issue as I am could huddle with that lobbyist and city staff, and VTA staff to be able to have a meeting sometime in the next couple of weeks? I just think that, you know, as you all know, there's a lot of decisions being made in DC, and I just don't know if we're at the table.
Yeah, we can certainly arrange that, of course.
So I think I'm seeing Jim shake his head, and we'll try and get he'll get that arranged.
Great, thank you.
Director Paul.
If this is a request for a subcommittee formation, I'd like to volunteer for that. Thank you.
Rather than go in the interest of time, rather than everybody go through the list here, if people are interested in being in that discussion, just send a note to Jim, and we'll figure out how to get that all set up. Is your hand still up, Sam? I'll assume not. Are there any other thoughts or comments or questions from my colleagues? This is an information item. We don't need a motion here. Takis, thanks a lot. You've got a lot of stuff going on. Just keep, plowing forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This brings us to other items. 8.1 is the general manager's report. Evelyn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to thank our employees for their continued dedication during these difficult times. I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the various agencies who immediately pitched in with mutual aid while our employees took time to mourn our lost colleagues. Golden Gate Transit, Santa Cruz Metro, AC Transit, SF Muni, and Samtrans. Our passengers saw many different buses on the streets of Santa Clara County for a couple of weeks, and we are so grateful for their help in our time of need. And of course, we will be there for any of our fellow agencies should they need us in the future. Last week, the light rail trains that remained out on the system since the incident were brought back into the light rail yard. And I want to thank the many light rail operators and ATU leadership who answered the call fourfold of what was needed to bring our light rail trains in from the system. All trains are now stored at the Guadalupe yard. That was not an easy job, as we're all still reeling emotionally, and the force of support from our light rail employees was very inspiring. Our light rail service is still suspended, and I thank the public for its continued patience. We've convened a task force to restart light rail operations. This task force is comprised of subject matter experts from operations, engineering and construction, facilities and maintenance, service planning, security, real estate, communications, and all of our 4 unions. Multiple task force meetings were held. The initial work to be performed is to evaluate the resources, operational requirements, and regulatory obligations that need to happen before light rail service can resume in the coming weeks. We will continue to provide updates as we firm up the date of service to return. We are appreciative of our riders' continued patience, and we are anxious to start serving the public once again. As some of you know, we implemented some service changes beginning June 14th, probably the most significant of which is the new shuttle service between Diridon Station and the Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. I want to thank our board members, Supervisor Chavez and San Jose Council members Perales and Davis, as well as our board chair for their participation in a very successful ribbon cutting. We had some terrific news coverage, and it was nice to see the enthusiasm from our community for the services we provide. That concludes my report, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to go to public comment. So Thalia, could we go to our public speakers, please?
Yes, Chair. We have two public speakers, Eugene followed by Blair. Eugene, you may begin speaking when ready.
Morning once again, board members, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam General Manager, Interim General Manager, rather. Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit Users. Just one concern, though, that I've had, especially over the last 2 weeks. I get that you guys are still having to mourn everything after the event of May 26th. One thing that is of concern is that you had bus service, even from companies like AC Transit, that actually serve the light rail stations. That bus service was dropped on June 1st. How come those same agencies that we like to thank for helping us out aren't at least helping us with light rail? At least provide that some kind of bus service for people instead of light rail, instead of having to have people ride up to several hours or even forced onto the road because there is no light rail. As I said, granted, I feel sorry for everybody that has had to go through the event of May 26th. It's just that the recovery needs to be way much better than this. Let's change it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Blair. You may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you. Blair Beekman here. Thank you very much for the words of Eugene. You know, I feel the exact same way. I feel that, what I've tried to say before, there can be light rail there can be bus service that reaches all the light rail transit points throughout its system, except along First Street. And there's a lot of important government agencies, residences, and businesses along that street that are not going to be served at this time and have to walk a long way to get to the bus lines, the few bus lines along First Street. You can get some federal funding help. You can create small shuttle services from Tasman to downtown. I hope you can work on this. It's really important for our good ideals. Maybe you can work on reopening the light rail from Tasman to, say, Diridon Station. And that could be good practice to eventually bring back the light rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like that was all of our public speakers. I'm going to go ahead and close the public speaker section. Did any of my colleagues have any questions? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to move on to 8.2, which is the chairperson's report. And for my report, I want to note that we've held 4 employee forums over the last several days. The employee forums were done virtually and in person. The purpose of the employee forums was to provide an opportunity for our employees to ask questions and to provide feedback and thoughts on the tragedy that we experienced. We invited a counselor to these forums and who talked about grief and resiliency. And I'll just mention there is grief counseling that is available for all of our employees since the event. Some of the feedback we've received has been related to safety, security, communications, and work culture. And I actually thought the forums were very valuable in terms of giving the opportunity for members, the employees, to speak directly back to myself and senior management. On a different note, I want to announce that in August, we're going to try and run our committee meetings as hybrid meetings. This will allow us to see how they go, with the intent to try and run our September board meeting as a hybrid meeting. This is not a commitment yet that we're going to go ahead and do this, but that's the direction and our current thinking for how we're going to try and transition from just pure virtual meetings to getting back to having regular style meetings, and we're going to go with a hybrid model. I am really excited to remind everyone that our new General Manager and CEO, Carolyn Gannott, will be joining us on July 12th, 2021. Carolyn will be picking up the baton from Evelyn, and Evelyn will return to her role as the General Counsel. I want to thank Evelyn and her team for the tremendous job they've done in the last few challenging months. And to all of our employees, I want to thank you again for your continued service. I'm sure the team that has been ready is ready to give Carolyn just as much support as they've been giving Evelyn for what's going on. Okay. Next, I'm going to move on to item 8.3. Are there any items or of concern or referral to the administration? Mr. Ricardo.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo the thanks and praise of Evelyn and everyone on the team who stepped up so admirably during the many difficult months in this transition.
Yeah, I just don't think those kind of words can be said enough. So no 8.3, 8.4, any announcements from anyone? That's going to take us to our closed session. We're going to be discussing items 9.1a and 9.1a.x. Board members, a closed session team link has been in the calendar invite that was sent to you from the board office. You can click on that link or call in. Board members, please make sure you mute your Zoom video and microphone during our closed session. Don't leave or log off your Zoom, so it's going to be easy for you to be able to come back. And I will remind everybody, it's really important for all my board colleagues to come back after the closed session because we have a special meeting that we need to go ahead and go through. So with that,
Chair,
yes.
Chair, this is Elaine. I think we have a hand up from the public. Sorry.
Okay, did I miss check it? Okay, let's go ahead and let the member of the public speak.
Okay, Blair, you may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you very much, Elaine Balto, Board Secretary. Thank you. I wanted to speak on the Chairman's report and just thank him and thank the VTA for your hybrid model ideas that you're going to be using in August. It will provide an interesting experiment for local Bay Area governments, how they can possibly work this fall. That I think can be a very interesting and helpful program for people. Good luck in how you can work with it. I wanted to quickly add that I have a lot of hopes for the future of the VTA electric bus program that's starting up, and we're just starting to get into it in May, and I hope we can continue to talk about it. I think it can be one of the positive things that for all of us to talk about the future of the VTA at this time. And I also wanted to mention that Chairman Hendricks, you have a habit of not taking public comment after your after your report. I hope you can work to allow public comment after you speak at the end of a meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any other speakers?
Yes, we have another speaker. Roland, you may begin speaking when ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Echoing the previous commenter on the hybrid meetings. Moving forward, I recommend that you monitor AB 703, which I think is going to be informing how we're going to be handling the Brown Act moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other speakers?
We do not, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close that. Getting back to what I was saying, we're now going to my board colleagues, mute your stuff here on Zoom, and let's go hop over on Teams to go ahead and have our closed session. So we're moving to closed session now at 10:57. Thank you.
Just to note, I'm getting blocked on the video.
Let's see if we can fix that. And Elaine, did you hear the comment about trying to fix Director Burt's challenge?
We're good.
There you go. The magic of the people who are in the control booth. Elaine, let me know when we've got everybody and can get started.
Chair, we have a quorum. So
Okay.
if our Deputy General Counsel can report out, it's appropriate.
So we're reconvening back to open session. We're going to do a closed session report. And I believe Vic is going to provide a closed session report on items 9.1A and 9.1.A.X.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Vic Papalardo, Deputy General Counsel. The board met in closed session on items 9.1A and 9.1AX. No reportable action was taken during the closed session.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to adjourn our meeting in just a moment, but I want to remind all of my colleagues, please don't go anywhere. Don't log out because we have our special meeting next. So I'm going to adjourn our regular board meeting here at 11:28. Okay, now that we're adjourned, I'm going to call to order the June 18th special meeting. The VTA Board of Directors is now called to order. Elaine, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Abekoga?
Here.
Blankley, Burt,
Here.
Carrasco,
Present.
Chavez. I'll come back to you, Constantine,
Present.
Davis, Gilmore, Jimenez. I'll come back to you, Ricardo,
Present.
Montano. Montano, hang on, let me make sure you're unmuted. I don't see your number, but I see you. I'll mark you as present. Paul?
Here.
Peralez?
Here.
Timidian? I'll come back to you. Jones?
Here.
Hendricks?
Yes, present.
Chavez? Okay. Jimenez? Timidian? All right. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. This takes us to item 2.1, which is to adopt resolutions declaring an emergency, delegating authority to the general manager or his or her designee. The full staff recommendation is on the screen. A reminder for my colleagues, this item has 2 resolutions and we need 4/5 or 10 affirmative votes on the first and 7 affirmative votes on the second. So Jim Lawson, our Chief External Affairs Officer, is going to provide a brief report.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present this. As the board and the public is well aware, we had an active shooter incident at the Guadalupe Division on May 26th. I think in addition to the tragic loss of life at that facility, there was also physical damage to the facility that needs to be corrected. And again, for the benefit of the public, the Guadalupe Division is the source of all of our mechanical and control and support for the light rail system. If you think of it in terms of an airport control tower, that's probably a pretty good approximation. Though in point of fact, the Operations Control Center there is a far more effective and efficient item. As you heard the General Manager, Evelyn, say, we are committed to return light rail service, and the quickest and most efficient way of doing that is by bringing back into service the Guadalupe facility. To that end, using the traditional bid process, which can take from 30 to 90 days, depending on the item, would be too slow in order to return this facility to full functionality. It's important to note that we'll have other decisions coming up. We are still in the process of trying to understand exactly what needs to be done. So to that end, we are asking the board to support 2 resolutions. The first of those is to declare an emergency. This is B in your packet. The first of those is to declare this as an emergency under the Public Contracting Code of the State of California. This does require a 4/5 vote And the purpose of this emergency is to take any, and I'm quoting, any directly related immediate action required by the emergency, procure the necessary equipment, services, and supplies for those purposes without giving notices for bids to let contracts. The law defines an emergency as the unexpected, sudden unexpected occurrence, poses a clear and imminent danger, requires immediate action to prevent, mitigate loss or impairment of life, health, and property, or is, in our case, essential public services, requires a 4/5 majority, and findings based on substantial evidence that this emergency exists and that the public process would result in a delay if we sought competitive bids. So that you are aware, any actions must be reported to the board under this, and the requirements are within, if it's taken within 14 days of a regular board meeting, it would be reported then. If the board meeting is longer than that, it would be reported within 7 days, and the reasons given for justifying it. Basically, what Resolution B asks is that you increase the general manager's authority from $1 to $2 million. This authority will be given for a period of 90 days unless revoked by the board of directors. It's important that you find that a lack of transit service to communities of concern in the transit-dependent population is an imminent danger to the public, and that the timely acquisition of these goods is in the public's best interest. The second resolution, which only requires a simple majority, is to modify our administrative code, and basically it would be to mirror the from $1 million to $2 million change, as well as being specific in terms of the leasing of equipment, because we strongly believe that it's going to be necessary to rent either office space or temporary buildings or during the time that we resurrect this facility. And just in closing, I would say it is imperative to get the facility up and running, because whether you run one light rail vehicle or 100, you need to have, if you will, the control tower back in operation. Again, we really appreciate the work of our colleagues in organized labor, the employees here at VTA, and their willingness to step up and get service back to the public in as fast a manner as possible. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. First, Elaine, you have your hand up?
Yes, Chair. I just wanted
somebody,
to...
if you could, somebody else, could you mute your microphones, please?
All right, I muted him, Chair. So I just wanted to note that I see Board Member Simidian on the attendee list. We were having some technical difficulties earlier, and I also see Board Member Jimenez. I just wanted to note that for the record. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you very much. Before I go to comments or questions from my colleagues, I'm going to go and see if there are any public comments. Do we have any public, so I'll open the public comment section. Do we have any public speakers? Thalia, could you go ahead and let our public speakers in, please?
Yes, we have one public speaker. Eugene, you may begin speaking when ready.
Well, good morning once again, board members. This is Eugene again, Silicon Valley Transit Users. We would just for transparency purposes, we would like, I don't know if it was legally possible, we would like to see at least a report of how the money will be spent, particularly in one, restoring light rail service as soon as possible, and barring that, at least working with either outside transit agencies like Golden Gate, AC Transit, Samtrans, or even private bus companies to at least restore, even temporarily, shuttle bus service to the light rail system as VTA's light rail infrastructure recovers from the tragedy of May 26th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I'm not seeing any other public speakers, so I'm going to close the public speaker section, and I'm going to bring it back to my colleagues to see if they have any comments, questions that they would like to ask. Member Burt.
Yes, thank you. So I support the need for this action, and think it's really a fairly moderate proposal, but I do have a couple questions. One is on the duration of the term of this authority. I think it's proposed for 2 years, but I was confused why it would need to be for that kind of duration rather than say 6 or 12 months. Can we get a little response from staff on whether it does need to be for that long of a period, and whether it could instead be for 6 or 12 months and then come back to the board for renewal if necessary?
Let's
Thank
see.
you for that question.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Jim.
Sorry. Go ahead. Yes, thank you for that question. That is an error in the write-up, and the request is for 90 days.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And my apologies. That was done late at night.
Yeah.
Missed
Good.
it. Thanks for catching it.
And then the second thing is on the reporting, not approval by the board, but just reporting to the board. You quickly went through that it sounds like there would be a timely reporting period. I wonder, Jim, if you could state that again a little more clearly. And I'm interested in whether there's a potential for reporting depending on the circumstances. So at the discretion of the general manager, but with an intention to provide advanced reporting of pending contracts, even though the board would not, that would fall under this emergency authority, even though the board would not be approving them.
To the best of our ability, we will keep the board informed in terms of the general manager's intention and try to accommodate that as much as we can. The basic purpose, Director Burke, is to avoid the 30 to 90 days that it would take to go out to bid on the items that would need to be acquired. And most of these items are, readily available, well understood. The pricing is understood, things of that nature. I hope that's helpful. And Evelyn would like to chime in.
Yeah, I want to distinguish the two resolutions. The first resolution is based on the Public Contracting Code, and that addresses the need to go out to bid and the time that it takes for that. So that's the reporting back requirement that is in a previously adopted resolution that we have in that regard. The second resolution, that piggybacks off of existing authority that the general manager currently has under the administrative code to acquire goods and services to enter into leases up to $1 million. What this would do is that it would increase the general manager's authority to $2 million, right? So it's separate and apart from, even so, leases don't necessarily require going out to bid, right? So that first resolution wouldn't apply, but so that they address two very different things. I just want to make that distinction.
Thanks.
Was that all your questions, Pat?
It is. Thank you.
Okay. Member Smitty. You're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to further clarify the provisions of the resolution. We have resolution 1 and resolution 2. Do I have that correct, Ms. Tran?
That is correct.
And in resolution 1, there is the issue that Director Burt raised about 90 days versus 2 years. In 1B, it indicates that the delegation is for 90 days unless earlier terminated by the Board of Directors. And in 1E, it indicates that the delegations are necessary for a period of 2 years unless revoked by board. Is that where the confusion was? And are we now clear that the delegation in 1B and E will be harmonized to be 90 days, or am I missing something here?
They will be harmonized for
90 days.
They will be harmonized for 90 days. Yes.
All right. And then on the delegation of authority under resolution 2, which is the resolution that you referenced, which would delegate authority to the general manager to enter into lease agreements for lease periods of up to 5 years for an amount not to exceed $2 million per purchase order to address the immediate needs, and delegating authority to acquire goods and services not to exceed $2 million. How long does that delegation of authority last?
There is no timeline. This relates to anything that is directly attributable to the need to restart light rail service, and that's been caused by this incident. But we can put in a time frame for that.
Yeah, I think just as a matter of good governance and transparency and accountability, a delegation of authority like this should have some outer time limit. And to Director Burt's earlier comment, if at some point there's a need to extend the delegation of authority, we could ask staff to come back and communicate the basis for that extended need. But is there a time period that you think would be sufficient to your needs at the present you could suggest?
What we can do to make it simpler is just to make both resolutions consistent with one another and put 90 days on there. And if we need to come back, we'll come back to the board.
Thank you. I think that's a wise move. Much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was all I had in the way of questions.
Okay, Member Paul.
I have a follow-up question to resolution number 2. In addition to the time limitation, is there an amount? I think if there is basically a delegation of authority to increase this limit from 1 to 2 million, but we're not given an estimate of how many leases might be affected, could we get an overall estimate of how much money we're being asked to potentially authorize on a maximum kind of level, with of course conservative estimates with regard to how much would need to be spent? I mean, if you think it might be 7, maybe we can cap it at 10 or something like that. But as written, it just seems like there could be a virtually unlimited number of leases that are entered into under this provision.
I appreciate those comments, and the challenge that we have is at this point we do not exactly know what those needs are going to be because we're still assessing the damage to the facility, the appropriate steps that need to be taken to move forward on this. Before entering into any contract, it would be necessary for us to have sufficient money in the appropriate budget to deal with it. And I think I feel safe in committing to you that we could return as quickly as possible when we have a more accurate assessment of what's going to be needed to do this. But what we did want to do as quickly as possible was make sure that we did not have to, spend 30 to 90 days waiting because we needed a trailer.
Right. Of course. And the thing I would suggest is, I mean, if we're trying to get a really generous upper limit, maybe take the number of square feet that we're looking at, round up to something, multiplied by a very high per square foot number, and then round that number, up to something. Just having the ability to make unlimited numbers of $2 million contracts, I mean, it gives me a bit of pause. So that's really
understood. Understood.
Yeah, thanks.
Evelyn, did you have your hand up?
Yes, to Member Paul's comment, we did run those numbers, and we're looking at somewhere between 1 to 2 million for the needs that we have regarding leasing. But to give us that flexibility, we can put in an upper limit on that, and yet build in some flexibility for us to react quickly. So could we address it by putting a $7 million cap, and that would include goods, services, and leasing?
Absolutely. I mean, I would be fine with a $10 million cap, frankly. I mean, just as long as the number is there, that that's not really beyond the pale. So thanks.
Well, we'll take the 10.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments from my colleagues? We've already done the public comment. I think what I'm going to be looking for a motion that is what's on the table here with the amendment that says we're harmonizing the two different resolutions to 90 days. And on resolution number 2, we're just going to put an upper cap on of 10 million is what I think I've heard from our conversations. And that I don't think it needs to be in the resolution, but I'm assuming that at our August board meeting, there's going to be more status update that's going to be given on light rail service, where we're at, and an update on this could be incorporated into that as well. But I don't think that needs to be in the resolution. So could I get a motion from my colleagues for the amended resolutions as I discussed, and or anything else you guys might want to add?
So moved.
Who is that? Is that
Bert?
Bert? Okay.
Member Paul seconds.
Okay. So we have the motion as I described. Just to be clear, I want to go ahead and say it's the resolutions that were on the table with the amendments to them that says we're going to harmonize the timing between them both to 90 days. And for resolution 2, we're going to put an upper limit of $10 million. Are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues? If not, someone from staff is going to call the vote.
Bert,
Yes.
Carrasco. Come back to you. Chavez.
Sorry, this is Carrasco. Aye.
Thank you. Chavez. Constantine.
Aye.
Jimenez.
Aye.
Ricardo. Ricardo. I'll come back to you. Montano.
Ricardo, aye. I'm sorry.
Montano, I could not hear you, but I heard you mouth aye. So if you could just do a thumbs up, please. Montano? All right. Okay. Thank you. Paul?
Aye.
Perales?
Yes.
Simidian?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Hendricks?
Yes.
I'll just come back to Chavez. Okay, I'll note her as absent. Motion passed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all very much for my colleagues for being able to come back. I think this is a really good tool that we're putting into the general manager's hands to be able to help return light rail service. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate everybody that we were able to come and rejoin us for this special board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn our special board meeting now. The next regular meeting of the board is scheduled for August 5th, 2021. Thank you all for attending. Please take care and stay safe out there. And we're adjourned at 11:50. Thank you all very much.